been pretty quiet out there today. Please put your question in the chat box because my back end team will let us know what your question is, and we'll make sure that this panel gets it. So I'm going to just start out, and I will let Marc start the panel. Let's welcome Marc, and he will pass the mic to each of our panelists. So let's welcome this great group of panelists.
Thank you. All right. So first and foremost, I wanted you to get to know everybody and appreciate you all being here. So let's go ahead, Josh, and introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
Yeah, I'm Joshua Fugate. So I'm the Director of Strategy and Architecture at Charles Schwab. So most of you have heard of Charles Schwab, if maybe you use it for a brokerage or your banking. But see, I've been there for about 4 years, including my time with TD Ameritrade. I was at TD Ameritrade, the big green building in town. And then we were acquired by Charles Schwab. So before that, I spent a number of years in banking and over a decade in the DoD. Everything from red teaming to application security to identity access management, cloud, so a lot of different areas. And excited to be here with you guys and looking forward to your questions.
Hello all, Manoj Regmi, VP of Technology at Farmers Eze. So my role at the time is focusing on technology, broadly speaking, strategy, interim CTO, report to CEO directly, and it's kind of interesting role where I'm leading the entire technology team, but also they asked me to lead kind of a cybersecurity program, so it's a pretty interesting time.
I'm David Elfering. I am a client advisor. I'm a security consultant at Marsh. So yes, I'm a consultant. I will charge you by the hour. So prior to that, though, I was a CISO for about 25 years, security director, help desk manager, WAN administrator, Unix administrator, Windows administrator, so all those technical things and garbage. I'm 2 gin and tonics in, so ask what you like. Let's do it.
My name is Dr. Lisa McKee. I have a PhD in cyber defense, and my specialty is data privacy. I have 20 years experience in security and do just about everything with the technical stuff. I started off as a programmer and didn't like it, and so now I do governance, risk, compliance, privacy, and all the other fun stuff. I am a founding partner at American Security and Privacy, and we offer products, consulting, services, and education, and I serve on some organizations as their virtual data protection officer.
Excellent, thank you. So Marc Johnson, I've been CIO, CISO, CTO, many different things, back down to the systems admin as I started in the industry and have grown since. So I'll be asking some questions and probing for some answers, and then we're going to open up to you to also ask some questions as well. So first and foremost, we'll go through a few seated questions, if you will, and then we'll open it up. All right, so first question, what are the challenges of controlling social media with the employees? TikTok being at the foremost or at the top of the list, and how do you handle that? So how do you take care of the culture in the organization according to social media? Who would like to take the first stab?
Okay, so I will take that one. That's a great question. So social media, right, we're all dealing with that in a lot of different ways. We always start with policies and procedures. So does the organization have a social media policy? What's permitted, what's not permitted? You cannot reprimand an employee if they don't know that they can't do that. So it's very important to make sure that it's written in policies. And where needed, getting approval from either a manager or HR or wherever that may be, again, making it known that that needs to be gotten in advance before they can do that. And most policies will always say that you're representing the organization, so you want to put your best foot forward. It's a resemblance of you. So what does that look like? And then that's how you should, project yourself on social media. That's how we approach it.
Excellent. So dive a little bit deeper into, we don't want to get overly political, but what about the geopolitical concerns around things like TikTok?
So my daughters are thoroughly addicted to TikTok, and frankly, if you've seen the Elmo character on TikTok, it's awesome. So let's talk a bit about manipulation. So what I talk to my kids about, my kids are 30, is why do you know why you're presented with the videos you're presented with? And ask that same question of any place you go. Why at the top of your feed in YouTube are the things that are there? And ask those questions. Ask critical questions. So I encourage critical thinking. And then in terms of policy from a corporate standpoint, I think the best lowest common denominator I could reach is to ensure that people understood that your voice is your voice, but only specific people can speak on behalf of the company. So logically, I can't prevent people, there's no way on earth you can prevent people from being part of social media in all of its various forms. And then in terms of TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and so forth, ask those questions about why the things that are there. This is my talk, right? Why? But ask that question. I love the question why, and so that's what I encourage.
Just to kind of echo the same sentiment, you know, I have a 17-year-old and she's on TikTok all the time. But point being, you know, my entire technology team, I would say about more than 120 people, I would say 40% of them are 26 and 28, 20 years old. So you can imagine like they'll be on TikTok or Facebook or, you know, all the time. So at least what I'm trying to do is implement policies, talking to them, directly reaching out to them, you know, so our training programs, working with HR, hey, let's not do this, you know, like, you know, so kind of, you know, obviously that's not my kind of, you know, wheelhouse, but awareness, telling them, hey, be careful, you know, do not use that, especially on the, you know, laptop that we provided them. So that's what we're doing.
So let's piggyback on that a little bit. Individuals being the largest vulnerability in our environment, how do we make sure that their hygiene for digital assets and so forth at home doesn't cross over into our environment, whether that be social media, whether it be otherwise how they're treating their passwords, et cetera?
So I think some of it's education, you know, obviously training, making them aware, making them educated. Back to kind of a little bit the earlier question, I think a little bit of what is the threat, what's the risk? You know, we're considering, is it data leakage, you know, proprietary source code, something that's getting out, you know, into social media. I've been there, we had to, you know, go through some of that. Is it, you know, just employees wasting time on social media? Is it, you know, nation states monitoring, you know, data mining this, you know, and profiling it? What's the concern for your business? What's the concern, you know, and then how do we address that? Because I think I don't want to just broad brush it all, you know, but I mean the DoD, you maybe just, hey, we're just going to block it, you know, or something. But then you still got all your contractors, you know, are they posting stuff out there, diagrams of architectural things out there? Again, you know, kids, computers. You mentioned computers at home, so. There, I think, you know, I think there's things you can do. How do you let your employees connect in this new world? You know, people working from home. Do you let them connect? Do you allow BYOD? You know, some environments do, some environments don't. And then if you do, is, you know, mobile BYOD, laptops, whatever. But then do you make them, you know, connect into like a virtual desktop? You know, maybe can you do that? You have, you know, even browser isolation kinds of things. Do you say, okay, we're going to provide you a machine, but then do you control what they can install on the machine? Do you control sites they get to on a corporate machine? I think those are all reasonable things. Just depends on your business model. But obviously, even for social media, you have social media teams that they need to be able to post stuff, you know, as part of their job. That, you know, marketing things that they're posting on social media about your company. So we want them to post. So, but for us, you know, there's training. They go through certain people that are allowed to post or what they can post or shouldn't post, even for regular employees, you know, what they should or shouldn't post. You know, going through some of that, just educating and making aware.
Excellent. So how does it differ from vertical to vertical, from healthcare to manufacturing to education as to how a CISO looks at the environment, how a CISO enables the security?
So at least I can, you know, stab at it. So, you know, I come from right now, you know, I'm basically in the farming world. So, you know, I've been in the security world for many years. Fast forward, you know, I work with a lot of growers, farmers, and even like employees, you know, who are on the foots on the ground. So it's basically, the mindset is very different. It's, you know, like, how do you, like, you know, the technology, So literally my cloud team and technology team, they're well-versed, high-tech, super modern. Then I look at, turn around, and it's completely different. So, it's basically, talking to them again, training, working with them closely. So,
Excellent. David, what are your thoughts?
I work with a cross-section of companies. So one of the benefits of being at the world's largest insurance broker, no commercial intended, but I see companies from multiple verticals. And across that, what you have to ask yourself is, what is somebody's motivation to get to you? If you have the latest plans for some stealth missile or bomber, guess what? You're facing nation-state actors. And so what are your threat actors? What is your threat profile? And based on that, determine what your rational policies and education are in order to ensure, to the best of your ability, because this is awareness training, that the people understand why you do what you do. At this point, I'm just an average user in my company. I say it's karma because now I'm like, oh, that DLP, damn it. But making sure you understand what your threat profile is and relating that to the reason why you conduct the education, awareness, and controls that you have.
Excellent. So I have to ask, Doctor, what about ChatGPT? Should we be concerned?
ChatGPT. So as an educator, I also teach at a university. It's a privacy concern for me. There's been a lot of news articles lately, an interview with Elon Musk over the last couple days that's been airing about the concerns with ChatGPT. Now, we all know that AI and deepfakes has been out there for a while. This just makes it a lot easier, and it makes it more available to people that didn't know that those were out there. Like, we've heard about it, we're in security technology, but moms and grandmas and other people that are now seeing it on TV and going, wait a minute, there was an article, an interview with a lady who had her daughter somebody pretended that they had kidnapped her, did a deep fake video, voice recording, and the mom thought it was real, and then called the daughter before she transferred any money and realized that it was a fake video, but it sounded just like her, and then they've done some other articles on that. And I think that's the scary part about it. We know as security professionals that that's not real. Many of us have probably created them. We educate our employees on that. But how do we educate the rest of the population? And how do we educate lay people and those moms and dads and those kids that are out there playing with it? There was an interview here at Creighton where they interviewed kids, and they're like, oh, well, it can do my homework that I don't want to do. And as an educator, as a professor, I'm like, well, how many students are turning in papers they didn't write, right? Then there's the ethical aspect of it, that just because you can doesn't mean you should. So yeah, there's a lot of calls right now internationally to put the presses on that and stop using that because of the security and privacy ramifications.
Excellent. So Josh, yeah, what are your thoughts?
It was just recently in the news, many of you may have seen it, but even Samsung, had some top secret source code just leaked because of a ChatGPT thing where, one of their engineers wanted to use ChatGPT to help it optimize some semiconductor, code that he had. And so he's like, hey, here's this code, fed it in. Well, they can't get that code back. So don't forget, whatever you submit to ChatGPT, it's going to stay there. So if you give it your source code, you're not getting it back. But it's used to train the model so it can continue to get smarter. Well, guess what? It might also, feed your code or things back to others to be helpful to them.
Excellent. So how important is it to know the language of the business? How important is it to know the business? David, I'm kind of serving this up on a silver platter for you. But more importantly, to not talk IT, to not talk InfoSec.
A friend of mine was a vice president at one of the local banks, and he said that whenever IT came in, his answer was just, it's like a migraine. It's going to go away. And the only question he had was, how much is it going to cost me to make you go away? And from a security perspective, I think the meme, it's like, I think I'm in this and I hate it because I've done that. I've been the person who comes in and causes a headache to the point where they're like, for the love of God, give him a check and get him the hell out of here. Sorry, camera. So yes, the language of the business is critical. This is the core theme. This is the drum I'll beat on all day long, is understanding the business and the relevance of security and compliance and risk to the business, because there is no other reason that we're there.
Manoj?
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think, and I loved your talk earlier, asking the questions to understand what's important to them. And I think, it's easy to go off on a spiel and here's all these security things you want to do and overwhelm them. Endpoint security and identity access management and application security, and you do, all these things and all these tools. And you get this, deer in the headlights kind of a look. And I think then say, okay, what's important to them? And then what are their crown jewels? And then how do we help them protect that, or at least start there, especially some that, maybe the small, medium-sized businesses that don't have some huge multi-million-dollar cybersecurity program, but then it's, well, what's important to them and how do we help them protect it? And something I heard from some other CISOs that it was a piece of good advice was, even they said, hey, read, if your company's a publicly traded company, read even quarterly reports and things that come out from your company. Search through them and look for cybersecurity. Do they mention cybersecurity? If they mention cybersecurity, what are they talking about? What's of interest to them? And how do we speak to that so that we're relevant to them? And just one quick story on that note. So it was interesting to me, both at TD Ameritrade and at Charles Schwab, when there was an all hands, thousands of people, 10,000 or so at TDA and nearly 40,000 at Charles Schwab, all hands. And somebody asked the CEO at both companies, what keeps you up at night? What is that nightmare thing? And they both answered almost identical answer that surprised me. And one of them even said, that's easy, the same as every CEO. And I said, oh, okay. Like my ears perked up. And he said, a cybersecurity breach. I went, whoa, really? Okay, they're getting it. The CEOs are getting it. And his answer was, he said, well, because if it's just a market downturn, it affects all of our competitors equally. We're all in the same boat. If it's a cybersecurity breach, it's us alone that's hemorrhaging. So, leave you that piece of advice.
So let's piggyback on that a little bit. Is it the program or is it the technology? Dr. McKee, what do you think? Is it more important to have a program of security or to have technology for security?
Okay, thank you for that. The program first, because without a program, what technology are you going to buy and why are you going to buy it? Your program drives everything. Your governance, your risk, why are you doing it? What are your risks? What's the issues that you're trying to solve for? I had that question earlier today. How do we know what products to buy? Well, what problem are you trying to solve for? I mean, there's a lot of vendors in the room today, and they all are offering something different. But that doesn't mean that you need all of those services and all of those products. If you're looking for an MFA, there's people that do that. If you want consulting services, you'll go find that. But if you don't have a program and policies and a strategy, then how do you know what to buy? I mean, we're not in the means to just throw money away.
Agreed.
So.
And how much does that cost?
It can be priceless.
There you go.
So just to piggyback on that, every organization is different, So in my case, at least what we're trying to do right now is, it's a modern platform. It's all cloud native, So from the program perspective, how do we work with, we're a small size company, so you can't have every single program, like automations or like SIM or vulnerability management, all those suite of things. We can't have all of those things like internally. So how do you leverage our partners? So in my case, I work very closely with Google Cloud. Everything is in Google Cloud, so I have entire team on the Google side who I work with very closely. So I agree with you. It's the program that dictates, or I don't know if the dictate is the right word, but that sets the narrative.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. So, Josh, what's the most real, ordinary thing that you're going after and protecting today? Instead of, just what's over in the media and Log4j or whatever, what's the most ordinary thing that you're focusing on right now to protect against?
So I think, for us, it's kind of both to safeguard and enable. It's kind of one of our mantras, safeguard and enable. And so I think, for us, we're looking at how do we enable the business so we're not an obstacle to them, but at the same time, protect them and protect the customer and all the customers' money, including some of your money. There's always, one of the things that, the CEO says is through the client's eyes. We have to see it through the client's eyes. But from the security point of view, that safeguard and enable, and so there I think one of the big things, of course, was how do we enable the workforce that's now all remote? We all go remote, we all work from home. COVID changed the landscape. And so then how do we enable people to do what they need to do without, security getting in the way and hindering them from being able to do what they need to do, but yet with the right controls in place so that they don't add extra risk to the company and our assets.
So just to kind of piggyback on that, so when I go talk to my CFO, and I'm sure everyone here, we talk about budget and it's like, hey, this is what I need for next year. The first answer would be no. Yeah. Right? Or not, maybe not no, but they're not giving us everything that we need. But then to me, it's about how do you articulate the problem or what I'm trying to propose, and it's the data. So once you provide the data, whether it's a public data or even like your internal data, like what are the risks factors or the risk score, and once you show that and you basically articulate it, most of the time it works, at least for my case.
So should the CISO or should somebody besides the CEO be communicating this to the board?
The ability to report to the board, the first time I reported to the board, I went over my time allotment, number one. But there was a debate before I went to the board because I had some things that were yellow and red. And the CFO was like, whoa, you can't show the board red stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm going to tell them the truth. And I'm not going to, and not to be alarmist, but what other, you want me to make red blue? Whatever you want, but it's going to constitute we're not doing as well. But what the feedback I got from the board was, it's the first time somebody told us everything wasn't perfect. And that to me was a moment where I went, okay, at least I know that they're looking for me to deliver some veracity in what I tell them besides, don't worry, everything's fine, just keep chumming the stock on the market and we're good. So yes, I think that there's a dividing line, and I've never had anybody actually say, no, you're changing your board message. I haven't had that moment, and I'm sure it happens, and I'm sure it exists, but the ability to provide a realistic and accurate picture to the board is paramount because the board is on the line. If the board doesn't ensure, the board is getting sued. They will be sued. The Uber the CISO is he already in jail? I don't know, he's going to jail, probably, which, whatever, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I don't know all the details, but yes, there has to be a source of truth to the board, and yes, CISOs can provide that.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I even think it needs to go even higher than that. And that's one thing I struggle with and see a lot as a consultant, is that a lot of the messaging stops at the middle management layer. And I always hesitate when I get asked, well, what about the role of a CISO? And I'm like, I don't know that I really like that role because you're on the line, the board's on the line. It's a personal liability, like you mentioned, right, being sued. And I don't know about you all, but I worked very hard to get to where I'm at. And for somebody to not tell me something and then be held accountable because I didn't know and couldn't react, I'm not sure that I'm willing to take that risk, right? It's personal risk as well as organizational risk. So yeah, it's very important at whatever level you are, from the front lines all the way up through the board, that you're communicating those messages up and letting management know and letting your managers know there's a problem, because we can't fix what we don't know. We can't assume that somebody else knows that there's a problem, and we're all in this together. We're all a team. We're all fighting for the same cause. And so there's going to be times they don't like the message, but at least you know you communicated it up and you can sleep at night because you did your part.
So no plausible deniability, is that what you're saying? That's right. All right. So with the economic downturn, I'm not going to say the R word, we'll get there eventually, but with the downturn, how important is it for you to maintain your budgets, and how do you then communicate the priorities in that budget to the board, to the CEO, to the CFO?
It's challenging.
That it is.
Yep. I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that, but to me, at least, the security program is extremely important. So it's all about, as I said earlier, how do you communicate to your board? So I do that annually. And look, I mean, it's pretty. When you saw that data, it's pretty binary. Maybe it's not binary, enough, but if we do not have program or a budget, and these are the impacts that can happen. And let's say I have 10,000 customers, and if something happens in one of my region, U.S. Central 1, if that something goes down in there, half of my customers are running over there, so we might lose this much of revenue. So I think that, as he said, that's all I can do. It's up to them after that.
So budgets are not endless. As much as we would like to have endless budgets, we don't.
I want one of those.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. No, budgets are important, and it's important that you strategize what you need and what you want. We can all want a blue sky, right? It doesn't mean that we're going to get it. We can want and wish for a lot of things. It doesn't mean we're going to get it. But you can't get it if you don't ask. And if you ask and they say no, that's okay. Then you find another way to get to that same end goal. There's lots of vendors. There's lots of providers. I am constantly reaching out to colleagues to go, hey, I have this problem. This is what I was trying to target. It's not, I don't get the funding for that. How are you doing it, right? We're all, reach out to your community and ask your friends, how are you doing it? We're all trying to solve for the same things. And if you don't get it this year, budget it for next year. The business priority is to grow. And as the business grows, your budget will grow, your head count will grow, and then you'll have the ability in the future to hopefully get the things that you need in those services that maybe you can't get today.
Excellent, excellent. So, Josh, what do you think is the best route when you negotiate with your CFO, with your board, for what those priorities are and what you have to take off the budget? How do you prioritize, and then what do you do to make sure that the things that fell off get taken care of later?
We try to rack and stack it, a lot internally before it ever goes up there. I mean, so just inside cybersecurity, we have over 650 people, and so there's a lot of, we call AOP, or annual operating planning, that goes into ahead of time. You're looking at, here's all these different things, and then, but I think, ultimately, it has to tie back to your strategy. It has to tie back to the vision that you've already laid out to the board, to the executives. And then, the things, again, that they're interested in. What's relevant to them? What are they interested in? When they come to you and ask you questions like, oh, my goodness, Colonial Pipeline, ransomware that happened. Could that happen to us? What are we doing about that? How do we make sure that never happens to us? I think that making sure that your strategy is addressing what's interesting to them, what they care about, or informing them of the things they're not aware of. And then how do all these purchases you want, all the technology you want, how does it map to that? And I think when you can tell that story well, that's really, it's not just, well, hey, I need another $5 million for this other thing. I need another $50 million for this other stuff. Okay, why? It's an endless ask. Mm-hmm. But does it fit the narrative? Does it fit the strategy that you've been informing them of, where you're trying to go, where you are, and where you need to be?
Does it behoove us, though, to create fear?
So, I'm not a bit, most all the cybersecurity presentations, all start, here's all this scary stuff, big, bad, scary, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We love FUD. But, I don't know that that's necessarily effective. I think we need to be aware. We need to, I mean, they read the headlines. They're not oblivious to the Washington, Times, the New York Post. I mean, all this stuff, they see this. They see the Mark Zuckerbergs that are called in front of the Congress.
Yes.
You better tell us, why did you let this happen? They don't want that to be them.
Absolutely.
So they're very aware of that, but I think we need to just make sure that we're relevant, we're answering, the mail for them.
Okay. So what about this zero trust thing? Manoj, you want to take that one?
I can try. So no, I mean, look, I think it's been around recently. I also felt in the same bandwagon, I will say that, especially in the cloud world. But what I can tell you is, in the beginning, I was like, oh yeah, this is great, let's do it. So, we're using different technologies, and then set different policies around it. But what we created was basically a process where everything stops. So is that what we want? So I would say that right now I am, or my team at least, we're trying to understand, is zero trust great or not great? So maybe that's a fine balance that we have to find, but at this time I really, I'm unsure.
So the thing I like about zero trust has nothing to do with any technology, and it's the first principle of zero trust is designing from the inside out. You design for the business process, and you test and you iterate, and hopefully you start with something that's not critical, because guess what? You're not going to get it right the first time. So it's that design principle. And if you, there's a great Google Cloud Security podcast interview with the founder of Zero Trust, and that's one of the first things he says is you design for the purpose of what it is you're protecting. You don't go in and say, well, we're going to go get firewall X and this client and that EDR. Those are ways to get there, but it starts with the why. Why are we doing this? What are we doing? Why and then what?
So if you don't know, I give talks on zero trust privacy. In fact, that's my RSA talk on Monday if you're going to be at RSA. The component that we forget about with zero trust is the data. We all think about architecture, we all think about identity and access management, and that's where a lot of organizations start on their zero trust journey. But what I like to talk about is the data. How do you know what architecture you're building if you don't know what data you have, where that data is going, who needs access to it? Because most likely you're going to build an architecture that doesn't fit your privacy obligations, your compliance obligations. And so starting with the inside out, right, and the data layer, and then moving your way out. And the other thing I like about it too that we often lose track of is least privileged and role-based, where we're taking zero trust down to an individual access. Just because we're on the same team, we're all on the security team, doesn't mean we're all doing the same thing. It doesn't mean that we all need the same level of access. Organizations struggle to do role-based and least privilege correctly as it is. They just think it's role-based and they forget the last component of least privilege. And that's where zero trust is really getting down to, is that point in time, when it's necessary, when it's appropriate, only for that point in time, and then it's re-authenticated and revalidated. And what we're seeing is statistics and breach studies show us that those organizations that have implemented or even parts of zero trust, it's drastically decreased their breaches and the fees that are associated and the costs with breaches by almost 70%. So.
Excellent. So let's dive a little bit deeper on that. So you talked about classification. I like to often say, data classification is bits and bytes and types of files. Information classification to me is value. How you put that data together in a record, whether that be a electronic health record or whether that be, your financials or whether that be the compensation for the organization. Is that a reasonable way to figure out where you should spend your most money or not?
So where you spend your most, how you evaluate that is based on risk. And I look at it from a compliance obligation.
Okay.
In order to know where your risks are, what are your compliance obligations? And most companies, when you ask them what are your compliance obligations, they can't tell you. They know the big ones, the HIPAAs, the PCIs, the SOC stuff, ISO maybe. But when you say, give me a full landscape of everything you have to comply with, that's when you get the blank stare of, oh wait, I've never actually been asked that before. But that's important because when you start looking at privacy and the data, where that data goes, where that data is stored, right? He talked about cloud. Cloud is great. That data can go everywhere, but that doesn't mean that legally you can do that. A lot of those privacy obligations, and especially if you do business internationally, you can't. There are rules and requirements that have to be in place to send that data outside that country of origin that companies just aren't aware of. And so in order to know where to spend that money, I have to know what those compliance obligations are, because maybe I have to have different cloud zones, and maybe I have to restrict that data and where that data goes and who can have access to it. And that might increase my budget because now I have multiple cloud environments. So knowing your risk, knowing your compliance obligations, and then you can start to figure out where to spend money and how to architect the environment.
So let's talk about that gotcha then. Healthcare is regulated. Finance is regulated. What about the unregulated markets? I mean, should they be regulated, or do we just decide we want to apply a certain methodology or framework to it?
So today, I'm going to go back to insurance. We're going to broker. So insurance is the beginnings of what could become a minimum, call it a minimum viable product from a security standpoint. If you're familiar with MVP, what are the things that you are expected to do? Not because we've quantified it, not because of anything other than if you don't do these things, you are malfeasant in your responsibilities from a corporate standpoint. And so I think there are bare minimum requirements that have to be met. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I like to actually, I asked this question in an interview one time when I was going from the DoD after a decade to banking. And so in the DoD, man, they love paperwork. They love paperwork.
In triplicate.
Oh my goodness. And the security of the system, at least from my experience there, was a lot around how thick is that ream of paper. And it was like, oh man, this is super secure. This is definitely, I mean, it checks all the boxes. It is very secure. And so I went from some of that on the compliance side to then red team. And so for a while I was on the red team at Stratcom. And so I got to, break into these systems that we help build. And so I got to do some of the engineering and help build the cybersecurity part of it. And then the offensive side, and let's try to break into it. And did they build it the way we told them to? And then you come back and say, oh my goodness, we got these critical vulnerabilities. And they say, no, we can't because the paperwork says it's all good. And I was like, I don't really care what your paperwork says because it's Swiss cheese. And there was this, no, it can't be, right?
Right.
And there was this disconnect. And so I think, and so one of the questions I asked then in an interview, they were interviewing me for a different position in banking, and I said, what do you care about? Do you care about compliance or assurance? I said, because if you just want a guy to check the boxes, I'm not your guy. If you want someone who's going to make sure you build assurance into your program, that it's secure, I'm interested. And then it was, so they ended up hiring me in that first week with the CEO and the CSO and the CRO and CISO and everywhere, all in this room. And I loved the words that I heard some of them say. There was, the CISO at the time was saying, and both the CSO and the CISO were saying, look, we think that some of the compliance is kind of a minimum bar. And if that's good, we need to be compliant. But we want to build assurance that we feel like is considerably above what the minimum requirements are for compliance. And this was music to my ears. I said, the Hallelujah chorus just kind of went on. Yeah, exactly.
All right, so I'd like to open it up to you guys to ask some questions, but I realize we have a logistics issue. I need you to come up here to ask the question so the people online can hear it as well. So anybody have a question?
We have a mic back here, so I can
Oh,
run.
okay.
I can run
You got
a
me
mic for
covered.
questions.
Who's got a question? I scared everybody that they'd have to come up here, right?
All right, thank you. So you talk about protecting the data, And in a lot of systems, I think a lot of companies are starting to say, hey, my non-production environments will have non-production data in it. My production environments will only have production data. Is there any concern, especially as we go to cloud to do this type of stuff, that there'll be lax or insufficient policies on protecting the data in the lower environments so that doesn't get properly tested and moved up to the higher environments?
Yeah, so we already see that today. A lot of companies will take copies of production environments and move it downstream. And if they tell you they don't, then ask again and ask and re-ask and re-ask, because most likely they are and they're just not telling you. The likelihood that organizations test environments is truly entirely fake data is very slim to none. It's how we protect that. So you can take production data and move it down. Are you changing the fields? Are you changing and anonymizing? That's one of the words that we use in data privacy is anonymization. If you anonymize the data in a way that it cannot be related back to a living individual, but it still maintains the integrity of the data field. So I'm putting in a random zip code, I'm putting in a random name, it still meets the requirements of a name and a zip code. That's my recommendation on how to do that. And we know that it's happening. The best thing to do is have policies and procedures in place. So policies that we acknowledge it's happening, but then procedures that say this is how we scrub and this is how we anonymize the data when we do copy it down, and then some sort of QA process to ensure that that step actually happens and that production data truly is not production data in a downstream environment. Does that answer your question? Do you have another question?
Well, again, I think. Sorry, again, what I get concerned about there is, again, we're working on that, and I agree, production data is getting down there anyway. But I worry about us getting lax on the security of the lower environments because we're focused on the production data in the production environments. And then are we truly testing and making sure that the protections on those lower environments really equal and match what you have in production?
Yeah, so that's another good point, the security of those downstream environments. In a lot of cases, they are not the same as production, and we do know that. And it comes to the cost that we've talked about here, right? Companies don't want to, there's a couple different reasons. The cost, if I put those same controls in a downstream environment, it's going to cost me money. It's time when I'm trying to do something, and time in processing activities. But then the down effect to that is, well, are you really then truly testing in a replicated environment because it doesn't have the same controls? So there are pros and cons to both. I always advocate for the same level of controls, but there are a lot of people that won't do that.
So you've encapsulated in a nutshell why years ago I became a very strong component for CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development. For the simple reason, and my developers looked at me like I was nuts. They're like, "You like CI/CD?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." I didn't tell them why, and it's because
We are nuts, right?
I'm sorry?
We are nuts, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's a starting point. So the reason is, so number one, from resilience, if your development and production are actually mirrors of each other, can you flip from one to the other without a hitch? That's part of your resilience, number one. Number two, the controls are consistent, but it means you have control, and there's automation. So you have, removing fingers from being put into the pie because you've automated. And the other thing I combined with that, and it was somewhat less successful, although CI/CD never really took place. People were like, "Oh, he's just nuts. Let's just keep doing it the way we're doing it," was what I called the Willy Wonka chocolate factory security model. Things go in, nothing comes out, which was agreement. It's like, okay, if you want a sandbox area, then things go in, nothing comes out. That doesn't mean okay, it means zero. And they were like, we can do anything we want in there, anything you want, game on. And so it became an area. Now that had its challenges because they're like, well, wait, we need some more data in there. But I allowed anything at all to go in there. It was Westworld for development, right? Go shoot what you want.
Yeah, so even in my past life, I think what we tried to do was, this was event log processing, if you will. So we tried to change all these IP addresses, domain names, FQDN, whatever. We spent, I would say, 1.5 years because we're dealing with like terabytes of data. And for this test environment, we're literally like, changing data did not work, obviously, So then our, basically at the time strategy was, these are customer data, we're playing around with it. So, but at the same time, we also got to test our next gen of our platform. So what do? So just like what C suggested, you have production environment, we just cloned, it's a test environment with a full control. And nobody has access to it, only like few testers. That was only a, I don't know, Band-Aid solution we did at the time, so.
Well, and not to be a fearmonger, but SOC 2 controls, we have to admit, now apply if we've taken the data from production to test. We can no longer scope out test.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, what's the risk? At the end of the day, what's the risk? And if the risk is the same in the development environment as it is in the production environment, the same level of access, the same people, or maybe greater risk because a whole lot more people have access to it, then I think you need at least the same level of controls. If you're going to put, greater risk, the same level, but your controls and all need to be representative of the level of risk. I think ideally, you're either masking, you use tokenization of certain sensitive data points, social security numbers. We're going to use tokenization. We'll use masking, obfuscation, things like that. If you can, is the most ideal. But some cases they say, hey, there's niche cases we have to have, this other data. And then you need to protect the environment in a similar fashion.
Do there happen to be any online questions?
I got a question for you.
Okay.
Yes, I
Then,
just want to go back to the artificial intelligence and the chat GP. I'd like to go back to the artificial intelligence and the chat GPT, and it's moving into from to 4 now, and it's going into 5. And what the Elon Musk and different CEOs of OpenAI say that there's really losing control of this AI process. And they want to, Elon Musk asked for a 6-month pause on developing, especially 5. And he's saying that we need government intervention to actually regulate this environment. That along with social media platforms, do you think that is a viable approach to try and control these different tech issues?
After working in the government for over a decade, I would say no. I think that, from that angle, I think that, do we need to make sure that we manage it well, that we, I think it was interesting, what was it, Microsoft let go their AI ethics team back, what was it, a few weeks back. I thought, oh my, that's kind of an interesting data point maybe, but maybe concerning. Do I think we need to handle it responsibly? Yes. How do we do that is a difficult question. I think, whether it's, I think we start with whether it's our households, our families, our corporations, how do we use it effectively, but yet not in a way that increases risk unduly? But, I think, I don't know, governing it overall, I don't know, I'm concerned to say, yeah, let's have the government do it because they're not exactly the most efficient or effective generally, or it takes a long time.
what do you mean, they don't follow NIST?
I like some NIST stuff. I think, NIST puts out some good things I do like, but
Samuel Alterman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, say there's no way that they're going to be able to control it, and they know that they're not going to be able to actually have industries, because you're looking at every other country is pushing the same way. And what they're saying, that they believe that if we do not have the controls in place, and Samuel Alterman said, as I said before, he said, we don't know what this is going to do. We put it into a black box, and what comes out on the other side is what we're going to have to deal with. And so I was just wondering, there's a lot of alarm in that industry. Elon Musk is one of the guys that I have some respect for in that space, and he says, he's very concerned about it, along with Samuel Altman and others in that area that's all over the internet saying, and this is just in 2023, and they're saying, and especially when they say 5 comes out, when they say GPT-5 come out, they said they are going to lose total control of it.
You know, I think it really comes down to we, as compadres, need to make sure that we voice our opinions and make sure that not only the software vendors, but our representatives in Congress know our fears. But that to be said, AI and ML are toddlers at this point. They're just learning. And quite frankly, they're gonna stumble here and there. And I'm not saying not to be concerned, but I don't think we're at a point of alert inflection.
And was it the Spider-Man quote or something? With great responsibility, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think, yeah, I think that, you know, how do we be responsible with it? But then at the same time, how do we regulate it? How do we govern it? And then how do we enforce that? If we're going to regulate and govern it, then are we backing it up and enforcing it? And with, was I look at with fines, with, I mean, it becomes a really complicated issue. I'd like to see corporations just kind of starting to say, put out guidance for themselves. Kind of here's what we need to do. Here's how we can use it effectively. But we don't want to leak our source code or things to it. How do we use it in a responsible way so it's effective but not posing a lot of additional risk? I don't know. You guys have other thoughts or comments?
We are doing that at the university.
Yeah.
In terms of the technology itself, you know, Pandora's box, it's the Greek myth, right? You open the box, you're done. And what happens, happens. But I think the idea of some degree of self-governance, and I think the government is not going to be able to regulate it in a useful way. It would take them years. And even then, the things that they brought out would probably be in reference to what was 2 or 3 years ago. So it's down to the models at the corporation, at the personal level. I wish I had a good answer for it. I mean, I just... I think, yeah, I think there's... There is safety involved, right? We all have lighters, matches, and things, and we learn how to not have unfortunate events for the most part, how to not hopefully burn down our houses, how to use our grills, and so forth. So there's some amount of learning. I think we're going to get our fingers burned in between. Like, I think somebody brought up Samsung, right? Uploading all their source code and then going, wait, there's our source code in ChatGPT. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. So I know we're coming up on time here. I wanted to thank everybody for being here. I wanted to thank the panel specifically for sitting up here and taking my abuse. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
I actually have one more question, even though a lot of our vendors broke down. Thank you to the vendors that didn't break down. And how about a round of applause for our sponsors, because without them, we could not be here today. So really, really quick, for the sponsors that are still here, I have a question for our panelists. You know, we all know that your inboxes are flooded, your LinkedIn's flooded. You know, it's impossible to get in front of a CISO unless you're me and I ask you to speak. And I'm lucky on that you guys answer me. So thank you for that. But what would your advice be to any one of these people that are here that would love to have an appointment with you on any given day? Can you just give us like a few words of wisdom to our sponsors out there? How do they get in front of you? This mic, you're going to have to use that mic.
Well, my rum and Coke is gone. Happy hour's always good. That'd be my suggestion.
Someone should have brought him a rum and Coke.
Yep. We love all these vendors, so cheers to them.
I think my best vendor discussions when when they're talking to me like I'm a person and not some prospect. You know, it's the old, eyes up here. So, I'm not just, sorry. Sorry, Internet. I'm probably going to be getting lit later. But yeah, it's talking to me like I'm a person. My favorite, and I have people that I still correspond with that are, we're on my sales side, on the sales side of bringing me things. And we talked like we were people to one another.
For me, it's knowing what I do. I get frustrated and people reach out to me and they're like, oh, well, I saw this thing in your profile and so you do cloud stuff, right? And I'm like, not really. So I get contacted by people that don't seem to know what I do or what I might be interested in. And also I get frustrated when people just put time on my calendar. Reach out to me first. Send me an email. Hey, I'm selling this. You're in GRC. I have a new GRC platform. Can we talk about it? Are you interested? As opposed to just assuming what I do and that I want time on my calendar. So yeah, like you said, talk to me like a person.
Yeah, I'll go back to some of the comments said previously. Develop a relationship. Yeah. Right? It's not about the cold call, right? Your technology might be great, might be whiz-bang, et cetera, but develop the relationship, and when the time is right, I need help, I will reach out.
Yep.
I think that value, the value added. I apologize. I did miss some of the sessions over in the other room, but I was telling some of the vendors. To me, it was a little bit like speed dating. I could go around to the different tables and get the elevator pitch and say, okay, how but how can they help us in our business? Here's what we're looking for. And I know it's a tough job for some of the vendors where, sometimes it's like, well, what are all your needs? Tell us all your needs. And it's like, oh, we can't until you sign that non-disclosure, and it's kind of this vicious, thing. But I like to, how can, here's what we're looking for. Here's where we're looking to go in our journey. How can they help us get there? But the relationship is huge. I mean, if there's different events, speakers, things going on, happy hours, whatever, and then getting together with some of the other, CISOs or other people in town, I think, and comparing notes and the vendors host it, I think some of those are wonderful. Kind of the networking kind of events that way, I think, are super helpful. But the relationship is much better than the cold calls or the cold emails.
Okay, well, that is it. Thank you all very much. How about a last round of applause for our panelists? We are, the bar is still open. We're going to do our prizes. And just really quick, I'm going to ask these people if they're still here. I doubt they are. Larry Long, are you in the house by chance? Or Michael Weekland? Or Andrew Kano? Robert Wagner? Okay. So